A suitcase hit the porch with a thud. Then another. Then a handful of winter coats came flying after them into the wet grass. The front door cracked shut with enough force to rattle the windows. A hand on the other side turned the deadbolt. Click. Locked. A frail body sat down on the top step, one hand pressed against a swollen belly, the other holding what remained. $43. A folded Social Security check. A photograph in a cracked frame. No car. No phone. No family left willing to pick up. And nowhere in that entire town that would take in a 75-year-old woman carrying a child she was never supposed to be carrying. Her name was Eleanor Hartwick. And within 7 days, she would own a cabin nobody wanted, for $4. What she found in its sealed cellar rewrote her life. Stay with me on this one. Eleanor had eaten nothing since the morning before. That was the first problem. The second was the cold. She slept on a bus bench near the terminal, her coat wrapped around the small, hard curve of her belly, her hand never leaving it. She was 75 years old and 6 months pregnant, and the only person in that bus terminal who knew it was the attendant who brought her a cup of coffee at 4 in the morning and did not charge her for it. "You all right, ma'am?" "I will be," Eleanor said. She did not believe it, but she had been saying such things for 54 years. You do not stop saying them because a stepson throws your suitcase onto a porch. Her husband Walter had died 18 months earlier. Quick, from the aorta. Standing in the kitchen one moment, on the linoleum the next. He had left a will, and the will had left nearly everything to his son from his first marriage. Daniel, the house, the accounts, the lake property. Walter had assumed Eleanor would be cared for. Daniel had assumed otherwise. For a year, she lived in the back bedroom of what had been her own house, eating when Daniel's wife Cheryl cooked, keeping quiet when Daniel turned the television louder. She considered it a temporary arrangement. She also considered that she had no other arrangement available. Then Grace called. Grace was Eleanor's daughter, her only child, 34 years old. 7 years of trying for a baby, 3 miscarriages, 2 failed IVF rounds, a uterus that would not hold, no money left for a surrogate. "Mom," Grace said, "the doctor said there's a trial. Older women. Experimental. It's a long shot." Eleanor listened. "You're asking me to carry it. I'm telling you what's out there." There it was. The one thing Eleanor could still do. The one gift left in her to give. She did not hesitate. Not for 1 second. The doctors had taken her seriously. Something about her blood work. Something about the trial cohort. She signed the forms. The embryo took. Grace cried on the phone so hard she could not speak. Daniel found out at month 4. Cheryl found out at month 5. By month 6, Eleanor was on the porch with 3 bags and a suitcase and the deadbolt clicking shut behind her. "Pack and go," Daniel had said. "We cannot have this in the house." He had not said the word baby. He had said this. Eleanor had not cried. Too tired to cry. Too practical. She had $43 and a Social Security check coming on the 5th. Grace lived in a studio in another state, working 2 jobs, saving for the baby. Eleanor would not put this on her. She needed a roof. That was all. She found it on a yellowed flyer taped to the wall of the bus terminal. County Sheriff's Auction. Properties sold as is. No inspection. Minimum bid $4. A list of addresses ran down one side. Most had a line drawn through them. At the bottom, one remained. Lot 47. Wooden cabin. Approximately 90 years of construction. 16 acres. Access road partially impassable. Title clouded but transferable. Minimum bid $4. Nobody else wanted it. She rode a bus to the county seat. Walked 6 blocks to the courthouse. Handed over 4 singles. The clerk slid a paper across the counter without looking up. He did not ask how she planned to get there. He did not ask why a 75-year-old woman in a bus terminal coat wanted a lot nobody in the county had looked at in 10 years. He stamped the receipt, slid it back, said, "Good luck." The cabin sat at the end of a dirt track that rain had half swallowed. She walked the last mile. Her back ached. Her ankles had stopped speaking to her hours before, and when she came around the final curve, there it stood. Small, low-roofed, faded to the color of weather. One cracked window, a warped front door. Eleanor stood at the tree-lean for a long time before she walked up to it. "All right," she said, to the cabin, or to herself, or to the child she was carrying. "All right." She pushed the door open. The inside smelled of dust and cold stone. That was the first thing. The second was that the roof had held. No rot on the ceiling. No water stains on the floor. She had walked into abandoned places before, as a younger woman, showing houses for a broker in her 30s. She knew what a dead house looked like. This cabin was not dead. It had been left. There is a difference. The front room had a cast iron stove, furred with rust but intact. A rocking chair, one arm missing. A bookshelf leaning against the wall, empty except for a bird's nest in the top corner. A small kitchen. 2 rooms in the back. One with a bed frame, no mattress. One empty, the window boarded from the outside. Eleanor set her suitcase down in the middle of the front room. She put one hand on the wall to steady herself and stood still for a long minute. Then she got to work. By dusk, she had swept 3 rooms, boiled water on the iron stove with firewood from the porch, and wrapped herself in a wool blanket she had found folded inside a cedar chest. She had eaten half a tin of beans and 2 crackers. Her back ached and her ankles had swollen. But the roof held, and the walls held, and the door had a lock that still turned. She was alive. The baby was alive. That was the arithmetic that mattered. She had been in the cabin 3 days before she noticed the second door. It was in the kitchen, behind the pantry shelves. She had pulled the shelves out to clean behind them, and there it was. A low wooden door, iron strap hinges, a heavy padlock rusted into its hasp, a name carved into the top plank, crude and deep, clearly cut by hand. Hartwick. Eleanor stood there a long time. Hartwick was her married name. Walter's name. She had not thought about what Walter's family had come from. He had been the kind of man who did not talk about his people. His father had died before she met him. His mother had died a year after they married. Walter had said once that his grandmother had been a difficult woman and left it there. M. Hartwick. Eleanor ran her hand over the carved letters. Cold wood. Deep cuts. No decoration. She tried the padlock. It did not give. She went to the front room and fetched the fireplace poker, and she came back and she worked that padlock for 20 minutes before the hasp tore loose from the soft, old wood. The lock fell into her hand, heavier than it had any right to be. The door opened inward onto a short set of stone steps. Cold air came up to meet her. The smell was not mildew. It was something drier, like paper, like a library closed for 50 years. Eleanor fetched a kerosene lamp she had found in the pantry, filled it from a jug she had boiled clean, and lit it on the stove. Then she stood at the top of the cellar steps and looked down. She was 75 years old and 6 months pregnant and alone in a cabin nobody had lived in for decades. And she was about to walk down stone steps into a room that had been locked for longer than her marriage. She went down anyway. The cellar was not a cellar. Not the kind she had expected. It did not have the dirt floor of a root cellar or the concrete slab of a modern basement. It had a flagstone floor set by hand. The walls were stone, lay dry, no mortar, maybe 15 feet by 20, and along every wall, neat as barracks, stood wooden crates, stacked too high, labeled in faded black paint. Eleanor lifted the lamp higher. She saw a long workbench against the far wall, covered in a canvas sheet. She saw a tin box on the workbench. She saw what looked like old sewing machine housings, only not quite. They had extra brackets, extra rods, pieces she did not recognize. She saw a chair with a leather seat cracked to the weave. She saw nothing that moved. She stood at the bottom of the steps for a minute, listening. Nothing. No rats. No water. No wind. She walked to the nearest crate and ran her fingertip through the dust on the lid. Came up thick and gray. She read the paint beneath it. Prototype M7. 1938. Do not ship. She did not know what that meant. A sewing machine part, she thought. An old factory's overflow. Walter's grandmother had been a difficult woman. Maybe she had worked in a factory. Maybe she had hoarded parts. Old people did that. Eleanor had an uncle who had filled a shed with coffee cans of bent nails. That was what this was, probably. Old junk. She was cold. Her lower back was singing. The baby had kicked twice since she came down the steps, which was the baby's way of letting her know the kerosene fumes were not welcome. Eleanor nodded to herself. She had seen enough for one night. She turned around. She climbed the stone steps slowly, one hand on the damp wall. She closed the cellar door behind her and leaned against it for a moment. She moved the pantry shelves back into place the best she could. She went to the front room. She put another log in the stove. She set a cup on the counter and boiled a second kettle. She made tea from a packet she had found in her coat pocket, a thing Grace had slipped there months ago for when her hands got cold. She sat down in the rocking chair with one arm missing and she drank the tea slow. The cabin was quiet. The fire whispered in the stove. Her back eased for the first time all day. Her ankles had stopped throbbing. The baby had settled. Just old junk, she said aloud, and she meant it. We're all right. She closed her eyes. She did not know it yet, but the last sentence she would say in peace had already been said. 3 miles down the county road, a black sedan had pulled off the highway, its driver reading a paper map by the dome light. The address circled in red pen matched the $4 deed in Eleanor's coat pocket. The knock came at 11 the next morning. Eleanor had slept heavier than she had slept in months. She had dreamed of Walter, which was not something she often did anymore. In the dream, he had been standing in a doorway holding a tool she did not recognize. He had not spoken. She had not either. The knock was not loud. It was the kind of knock a man uses when he wants to be heard but not frightening. 3 even raps. A pause. 3 more. Eleanor eased herself up from the mattress. She had brought a mattress up from a bed frame in the back room, aired it by the stove 2 whole days, and decided it was the best she was going to get. She went to the window. The sedan was black, city clean under the dust from the dirt road. A man stood on the porch. 80s maybe. Good coat. Gray hair combed back. Hands folded politely at his waist, the way a church usher holds them. Eleanor did not open the door. Who is it? Ma'am, my name is Harlan Webb. I was wondering if I might have a word. About what? A pause. Then, very polite. About the property you purchased. I have a matter of family interest to discuss. Eleanor stood behind the door, one hand on the latch. Her other hand had not left her belly since the knock. She waited. A man in his 80s. Polite. Alone. A baby that needed her to be calm. She opened the door 6 inches. Harlan Webb did not try to push it wider. He did not smile. He tilted his head and looked at her with the slow, measuring look of a man who had paid for information and now wanted to see whether the information was correct. You're older than I expected, he said. Most people are. You're Mrs. Hartwick. How did you get that? County records are public, Mrs. Hartwick. Lot 47 sold 3 days ago to an Eleanor Hartwick. I checked. My father knew your husband's people. A long time ago. I believe there is something in this cabin that belonged to my father, and by rights belongs to me. I have come to buy it back from you. Eleanor did not answer. Harlan Webb reached into his coat pocket. Slow. He drew out an envelope and held it up, not pressing it toward her. $10,000, he said. Cash. Today. You hand me the key to the cellar and I take what is mine and I am gone by sundown. You keep the cabin. You keep the money. You never see me again. That is the offer. Something cold moved up Eleanor's spine and did not stop at her shoulders. Because a man does not drive to the end of a washed-out county road and offer $10,000 for something he calls old junk. He does not wear a good coat for nothing. He does not know the lot number of a cabin nobody has looked at in 10 years unless he has been looking at it himself. And he had said the cellar. He had said it without ever being told there was one. Eleanor closed the door. She did not slam it. She did not shout. She turned the deadbolt very quietly and she stepped back. Through the door, Harlan Webb's voice came through calm and even. Mrs. Hartwick, I am 84 years old. I am not going to force that door. I am asking you as a courtesy. I will be at the diner in town until 6 this evening. After that, my offer is withdrawn and the matter goes to other hands. Good day, ma'am. She listened to his footsteps leave the porch. She listened to the sedan door close. She listened to the engine turn over and fade down the dirt road. Only then did her hand move off the deadbolt. She sat down in the rocking chair because her legs would not hold her anymore. Other hands. He had said other hands. She turned those 2 words over for a long minute. Then she got up and she went to the pantry and she moved the shelves aside and she went down into the cellar with the kerosene lamp held high, and this time she did not glance at the crates. She went straight to the workbench. She went straight to the tin box. The lid came off with a thin metal sigh. Inside was a single leather-bound ledger. Inside the front cover of the ledger, folded twice, was an envelope. The envelope had 3 words written on it in old brown ink. To the air. Eleanor sat down on the cracked leather chair and she opened the envelope. If you are still with me in this story, do me one favor. Hit the subscribe button and stay to the end. What was in that envelope is the reason I wrote this one. She read by lamplight. The letter was dated May of 1953. The handwriting was small and certain and old-fashioned. The way a schoolteacher's hand looks when a schoolteacher is writing something she has thought about for years. If you are reading this, the letter began, you are one of 2 kinds of people. You are either the blood I hoped would come, or you are the man whose father I cannot forget. Either way, I have left you a choice in this cellar, and the rest of this letter will tell you how to see it. It was signed Mabel Hartwick, Walter's grandmother, the difficult woman. Eleanor lowered the letter and stared at the signature for a long time. Then she flipped the page. The second page was instructions. Short, practical. Mabel Hartwick had been a woman of few words even on paper. There is a floor stone under the workbench, marked with 3 chisel cuts. Lift it. Below is a tin. In the tin is everything. Eleanor set the letter aside. She held the lamp low and she crawled under the workbench with one hand under her belly for balance. Her knees did not thank her. She found the flagstone in 15 seconds. 3 straight chisel cuts, clean as an address. The stone came up with a little work. Below it, a square of packed earth and a tin, not quite the size of a bread box. She lifted the tin out and set it on the workbench. She was sweating. Her hands were shaking. Inside the tin was a second envelope, thicker than the first, and a folded square of oilcloth, and under the oilcloth a wooden box, and inside the wooden box, wrapped in muslin, 12 gold coins. Old gold. Mexican eagle coins, the kind men had carried across borders in the 30s and 40s because paper money had gotten nervous. Eleanor did not count them twice. She did not need to. She had grown up in a country kitchen where her father had kept a single such coin in a jelly jar as a family talisman. She knew what she was looking at. But the coins were not the point. The envelope was the point. The envelope held a bundle of paper that had been pressed flat for 70 years. Patent applications. Drawings, done in a careful hand, of a mechanism Eleanor did not recognize at first. And then slowly did. A feed mechanism. A thing that moved thread past a needle in a way that did not snag. She had seen this mechanism 1,000 times in her life. Every sewing machine ever made in the last 70 years used a version of it. Every garment factory in this country, every upholstery shop, every airbag in every car, stitched on lines that ran on this principle. The applications were stamped, all of them with the same two words: application denied. Clipped behind the applications was a bundle of correspondence. Letters from a lawyer to Mabel Hartwick. Letters from Mabel Hartwick to the United States Patent Office. Letters from a man named Howard Webb to Mabel Hartwick, offering to buy her out for a sum that had sounded large in 1937. Letters from Mabel refusing. Letters from Howard Webb's attorney, filing a patent on the same mechanism 3 months later, under Howard Webb's name alone. The last document was a sworn affidavit from a draftsman named Arnold Kessler, who had worked in Howard Webb's office in 1936. The affidavit named dates. It named drawings. It named the original hand that had drawn them, Mabel Hartwick's hand. The affidavit was notarized. The notary seal was still clear. Eleanor put the letter down and she sat in the cracked leather chair and she breathed. The man on her porch had been Harlan Webb, Howard Webb's son, Howard Webb's heir. Howard Webb had built a company on a mechanism he had stolen from a widow in an upstate cabin, and that company had grown for 3 generations, and Harlan Webb had driven to her door this morning to finish what his father had started. The cellar was not a cellar. It was a safe. It had been a safe for 87 years. It had been waiting. The first page of Mabel Hartwick's letter had said, "I have left you a choice." The choice was simple. Sell the contents to Harlan Webb for whatever he would pay, and let the company keep its history clean. Or walk these papers into a law office and turn a 3-generation theft into a public record. Eleanor Hartwick was 75 years old and 6 months pregnant, and she had $43 in her pocket when she had walked into this county. She folded the papers back into the envelope. She wrapped the gold. She put everything into the tin, and she put the tin into her suitcase, and she climbed the cellar steps slower than she had come down them. She put the pantry shelves back. She sat down at the kitchen table. She looked at the clock on the wall, which did not run. It was 4 in the afternoon. Harlan Webb had said he would be at the diner in town until 6. Eleanor Hartwick put on her coat. She took the suitcase. She walked the mile of muddy road back to where the county blacktop began. She raised her hand at the first truck that passed. A man named Ray Cummins, 62, a dairy hauler on his way home, pulled over because a pregnant old woman standing in the mud on a county road is not a thing most men drive past. "Ma'am, are you all right? I need to get to the courthouse in town," Eleanor said. "And then I need to get to a law office. Do you know one?" Ray Cummins knew one. At 5:40 that afternoon, Eleanor Hartwick walked into the offices of a lawyer named Thomas Brenner, whose name was on a brass plaque across from the courthouse, and she opened her suitcase on his desk. She laid out the tin. She laid out the patents. She laid out the affidavit of Arnold Kessler, notarized in 1953, and she laid out the letter from Mabel Hartwick, and she said, "I need you to tell me if this is real." Thomas Brenner was 71 years old. He had practiced law in that town for 46 of those years. He read the first page of the affidavit. He set it down. He read the second page. He set it down. He took his glasses off and he folded them and he laid them on his desk and he looked at Eleanor Hartwick for a long moment. "Mrs. Hartwick," he said, "please sit down. This is going to take the rest of the evening." The rest of the evening turned into the rest of the year. Thomas Brenner knew the story before Eleanor finished telling it. He knew it because his own father had drafted Mabel Hartwick's will in 1953, and the law office Eleanor walked into that afternoon was the same office, 3 generations down. He knew a trust had been sitting in the firm's records for 70 years with a single activation clause. The cabin was to be listed at the sheriff's sale every 10th year for $4. Minimum bid, no reserve. When a buyer of the Blood Hartwick line finally purchased it and opened the cellar, the clock would begin. The clause had never been triggered. It was triggered now. "Your husband," Brenner said. "Walter. Did he ever speak of his grandmother?" "Not by name." Mabel Hartwick did not trust her own son. "Your father-in-law." She believed he would have sold the papers to Howard Webb within a week of her burial. She was probably correct. So she buried the cellar instead and left the cabin in trust. And the trust was written so that only desperation would open it. That is why the minimum bid is $4. Anyone with a home did not need it. Only someone with nothing at all would ever come this far. Eleanor did not answer for a long time. I had nothing at all, she said. That is evident, ma'am. They filed the first motion 3 weeks later. Harlan Webb did not appear at the hearing. Harlan Webb retained counsel out of Chicago and sent a settlement offer that was 10,000 times the one he had handed her on the porch. Eleanor did not accept it. Thomas Brenner did not accept it. The affidavit of Arnold Kessler, notarized in 1953, held up in court the way stone holds up. The patents had been stolen. The company had been built on stolen ground. The settlement that eventually came 6 months later was paid without admission of guilt and without further contest, and under a non-disclosure Eleanor Hartwick refused to sign. The amount was not the point. The point was Grace. Grace flew in the week after the cabin cleared escrow. She was 34 years old, hollow-eyed from the bus from the airport, wearing a coat a size too thin for upstate in March. Eleanor met her at the county road with a thermos of tea. They did not hug on the road. Grace put her hand on her mother's belly, and she cried for the 4th time in 7 months. And Eleanor held the back of her daughter's head the way she had held it when Grace was 4, and she said, "It is all right. It is all right now." The baby came in June at a small hospital in the county seat. A girl, 6 pounds 11 ounces, healthy as a foal. The doctors wrote her birth up in a medical journal, because 75-year-old bodies do not carry babies to term and then hand them living to their daughters. Eleanor did not read the article. She did not need to. Grace named the baby Mabel. Daniel called in August. Eleanor let it go to voicemail. He called again in October. He called a 3rd time on Christmas Eve. By then, Thomas Brenner had put the cabin, the 16 acres, and a portion of the settlement into a trust in Mabel's name, and Eleanor had moved into a small brick house in the town where the diner was, and Grace lived 6 blocks away with the baby, and Eleanor walked to the law office every Tuesday for coffee with Thomas Brenner. On Christmas morning, Eleanor listened to Daniel's voicemail. He sounded older than she remembered. He said the words he was supposed to say. He said he had not understood. He said he hoped they could talk. Eleanor looked at the little tree in the corner of her front room. Mabel was on a blanket under it, chewing on a wooden ring. Grace was in the kitchen making breakfast. Thomas Brenner was due at 10. She did not call Daniel back. She did not call him back a week later, either. She had stopped being a woman who sat on porches waiting for doors to be opened to her. She had spent a lifetime being that kind of woman, and it had ended at 75, when a door had closed behind her and a deadbolt had turned and her suitcase had come out after her into the grass. Every door she opened now, she opened herself. And every door she did not open because it was no longer required of her. She kept the cabin. She did not live in it. She could not have climbed those cellar steps again if she had tried. But she kept it, and she had it weatherproofed, and she had a local family check on it once a month. The iron stove was still in the front room. The rocking chair with one arm missing was still where she had sat that first night and said, "Just old junk." The cellar was empty now. Its flagstones had been lifted and reset. The crates had been moved to a climate-controlled room at the law office, and most of them had gone to a textile museum in Providence. And the tin with the gold coins sat in a safe deposit box that belonged, on paper, to a baby girl named Mabel. Once a year, on the anniversary of the day she had walked the muddy road, Eleanor took Grace and Mabel to the cabin. They did not go inside. They stood at the treeline. They looked at the small, low-roofed, weathered shape of it. "Grandma," Mabel asked, the first year she was old enough to ask anything, "whose house is that?" "It belonged to a woman who looked like you," Eleanor said. "A very long time ago. She left it for us to find." "Did she know you were going to find it?" Eleanor thought about that for a moment. About a cellar door locked for 87 years. About a ledger wrapped in oilcloth. about a trust written by a woman who had never met her, and an auction sheriff who had stamped a receipt for $4 without looking up, and a bus terminal attendant who had not charged her for a cup of coffee at 4 in the morning. "Yes," Eleanor said. "I believe she did." She took Mabel's hand. She took Grace's arm, and the three of them turned around and walked back down the dirt road together, under the white oak and the birch, toward the county blacktop, toward the town, toward the next ordinary day of the rest of their ordinary, good, and entirely opened lives.